In today's video, we're talking about a crime in Arizona called harassment. Believe it or not, there actually is a crime for harassing somebody. It has some key specific elements that we need to talk about. It's not very commonly charged. A lot of the time the conduct will be charged as something else like disorderly conduct, or it will escalate into an assault type of a situation. But there are times when something doesn't actually reach the assault level or a trespass or any of those things, and it's more similar to harassment. So let's look at the statute, let's look at the language and some of the definitions. It's defined under ARS 132921, and it says that you can be convicted, you can be found guilty of harassment if you have intent or knowledge of doing one of the following things. So the first line item is talking about communication. So if with intent or knowledge you communicate in a manner that harasses somebody else, that's enough. That is enough to find you guilty of harassment. Well, there's more to it, but it's talking about communication. That can include verbal communication, face-to-face conversations, can include text messages, emails. They talk about mechanical writings. You can send written letters to somebody. Any type of communication essentially is covered under this portion of the statute. And so if it's communication that harasses somebody, causes another person, or communicates in a manner that causes another person to feel harassed, that's enough. The next way that somebody can be found guilty of harassment is if you are following somebody around in a public place for no legitimate purpose and they've asked you to stop and you keep doing it. So this would be like in a park or in a public facility where you're following somebody around, it's causing them to feel harassed, and they've asked you to stop and you don't do it. They can charge you with harassment under that circumstance. Similarly, if there's any type of repeated acts that cause another person to feel harassed. So we're going to define what harassment is, or what being harassed is, but this is the conduct. So if there's repeated acts, you act or you cause somebody to act in a way that makes somebody feel harassed and it's happening repeatedly, they can charge you with that. Also, if you surveil somebody over and over with no legitimate purpose, that can constitute harassment as well. So this would be taking pictures of somebody, following somebody around, kind of eyeballing them, doing video recordings, any type of surveillance that causes another person to feel harassed with no legitimate purpose is enough. Also, if there are multiple reports that are being filed against somebody, so if you file reports or if you cause somebody else to file reports, things like police reports or reporting problems to a credit bureau or making any type of false report to any agency, if you do it on more than one occasion, they can charge you with harassment for that. So if the person you're filing charges against sees or has reason to believe that you were the person doing it, they can report this as harassment. Of course, it's up to the officers to decide whether or not to actually move forward with filing harassment charges or making an arrest, but that is an element of the law. Also, if you interfere with the delivery of a public utility, so if you are preventing somebody from getting their cable TV, or if you're blocking somebody from getting their satellite, if you are turning off water or causing some sort of interference with the delivery of a public utility, that can constitute harassment. So it doesn't necessarily have to be to the person his or herself, but if there's some sort of interference with them getting public utilities, that can be harassment. There's also another weird portion of the statute that talks a lot about filing liens against public officials or public agents or employees without their consent if it's related to real property. Not common, we don't see that really ever, but that is in the statute. So if you have a proclivity of filing liens, you could be charged with harassment against that under that statute as well. But the real big question comes down to what constitutes harassment. So you can see here the statute's pretty vague. What is communication that would constitute a communication that would harass somebody? What is that type of communication? Well, the law sets out some specific requirements. So in order for harassment to be considered harassment, some sort of communication to be considered harassment, or some act or some activity, it has to do a couple things. It needs to be conduct that's directed at a specific person. So it needs to be a specific person. That's what's in the statute, meaning it can't be just kind of conduct that's general in nature. It needs to be directed at somebody. If it's not directed at somebody, if it's directed at society in general, that might be a good defense to the harassment charge. The other thing is that it must cause a reasonable person to actually feel seriously alarmed, annoyed, or harassed. So when we're talking about a reasonable person standard, it's not subjective, meaning it's more of an objective test. So would a reasonable person, under these circumstances, under these conditions, would they actually feel seriously alarmed, annoyed, or harassed? If it would be unreasonable for a person to feel that based on the conduct, that element is not going to be met and it's not going to be considered harassment. So you look at, in general, what would a reasonable person do? Then we also look at what this specific person would do. So would a reasonable person feel harassed, and did the person under the circumstances actually feel harassed? So we have here conduct, the conduct that is alleged to be harassment, it in fact caused that individual to feel seriously annoyed, alarmed, or harassed. So you can see there's a reasonable person test and an in fact test. So if you take the reasonable person test and you can say, well, this individual really shouldn't have felt harassed. This was kind of a mild type of situation. And so a reasonable person would not likely have felt harassed, but this person did, that's going to fail the test. Or if you say a reasonable person would feel harassed, but this specific person didn't at all, they just kind of shrugged it off, this may have been very normal for them, that element of the test is not met because there was no in fact harassment. So that's how you define harassment. Then you take that definition and you plug it into each one of these different line items here, and that's what constitutes harassment. This can also be a domestic violence offense. So this type of situation can arise between family members, people residing in the same residences, people who are married or formerly married, people in romantic or sexual relationships. They can charge somebody with harassment and then tack on a domestic violence designation, which can actually increase the penalties and the severity and the requirements, things like counseling and follow-up treatment and all of those different things. So if you've been charged with harassment, you want to speak to our team about your particular case and what some of the best defenses will be, give us a call. We offer free case evaluations. We'll have you come into our office, we'll sit down, we'll talk about your case, make sure you have a good plan moving forward. We look forward to speaking with you. Thanks for watching.